When a former rugby player turned royal insider hits record everything changes. Mike Tindall's leaked audio, whispered through palace corridors and now exploding into public view, contains Camilla's most private and dangerous intentions. What was meant to be hidden forever has surfaced, threatening to unravel the monarchy's delicate facade. But why now? And why him? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began as a whisper, a suspicious audio file passed from inbox to inbox, first among elite media circles, then among palace staff, and finally into the public domain like a ticking bomb. The source was quickly identified: Mike Tindall. Known to many as the easygoing former rugby champion who married into the royal family, Mike had long managed to fly under the radar. Until now. The recording, reportedly captured on his personal device, includes Camilla's voice in a private setting, speaking in unfiltered and cold terms about the future of the monarchy. The words themselves were not screamed, not even emphasized, but their content? Chilling. It wasn't merely idle gossip, it was a blueprint, a strategy. And it shook every corner of the monarchy like an unexpected earthquake. The implications were instant. Not even 24 hours had passed before royal legal teams were deployed, media outlets were issued vague warnings, and hush orders flew behind palace doors. But the damage had already been done. The clip, shared on encrypted platforms and copied across continents, was out in the wild. It revealed more than tension. It revealed intent. Camilla, in the leaked audio, speaks of shaping a monarchy leaner, stronger, and free of unnecessary baggage. She doesn't name names in that segment, but her tone leaves little to the imagination. For royal watchers and insiders, it wasn't just what she said, but how she said it that disturbed the nation. Suddenly, Mike's motives were under scrutiny. Was this an act of revenge? A desperate cry for help? Or perhaps something more calculated? Those close to the family say the tension had been building for months, whispers of strategic sidelining, internal battles over representation, and quiet slights exchanged behind elegant smiles. But to go so far as to record a private royal conversation? That wasn't just rebellion, it was war. A war launched not by a prince or politician, but by a man who had always seemed immune to the crown's political undercurrents. Now, his actions had placed him at the very center of the storm. The backlash was immediate and global. Within hours, the hashtag Camilla Exposed rocketed to the top of trending lists. The press, both tabloid and mainstream, scrambled to verify the audio's authenticity, while the palace remained ominously silent. Camilla's defenders called it a betrayal of trust. Her critics declared it the unveiling of a long-held suspicion that the queen consort had ambitions far beyond ceremonial duties. The royal family, once a symbol of tradition and unity, now stood on the edge of fracture, caught between loyalty and exposure, silence and outrage. But to understand the full gravity of Camilla's so-called plans, we must rewind to a family dinner where tensions first ignited. They gathered for a family celebration, smiles for the cameras, bitterness behind the scenes. What started as light chatter turned into an explosive confrontation between Camilla and a lesser-known royal voice, Mike Tindall. That night, something shifted forever. Clarence House had hosted countless royal dinners over the decades, but none quite like this one. Ostensibly, it was meant to be a casual gathering, just family, no formalities. Yet behind the polished silverware and perfectly poured wine, tension simmered just beneath the surface. It had been building for months, maybe years. The public saw a family, but those inside saw factions. On one side, the queen consort, increasingly confident in her new authority. On the other, those who felt they were being slowly edged out, quietly erased. And as the evening unfolded, the unspoken finally found a voice. Wine flowed freely, and so did opinions. What began as polite conversation about the future of royal engagements quickly took a sharper turn. Camilla, emboldened by her position and perhaps a few glasses in, made no effort to hide her disdain for what she called dead weight within the family. With Charles soon to reduce public-facing duties, she reportedly said it was time to simplify the crown and focus only on the essentials. To most, it might have seemed like a vague comment on efficiency. But to Mike Tindall, it struck a nerve. He knew what she meant, and more importantly, who she meant. Zara, Anne, Beatrice, even Edward, the so-called non-working royals. Camilla wasn't talking about reform. She was talking about removal. Mike challenged her, not with anger, but with steady conviction. Sources say he reminded Camilla that the monarchy was built not only by those who wore crowns, but also by those who served in quieter ways. He spoke of loyalty, of service, of legacy. But Camilla brushed it off. She reportedly quipped, "Loyalty doesn't pay the bills or the press." The room went silent. Zara's fork clattered against her plate. Moments later, she excused herself from the table, her eyes brimming with tears. What had been simmering in private was now boiling in public. A line had been crossed. For Mike, that moment was transformative. He had always played by the rules, content to stand in the background and let the crown do what it must. But now, something inside him snapped. He saw not just a power grab, but a quiet, calculated coup. He realized Camilla was not just expressing opinions. She was planting seeds, shaping narratives, testing boundaries. And no one seemed willing to stop her. That night, Mike made a decision. If no one else would speak, he would listen. If no one else would act, he would prepare. And so, quietly, without telling a soul, he began to record. Not to start a war, but to build a shield. What Camilla didn't know, what none of them knew, was that her careless words had awakened something dangerous. Not a rebel, not a traitor, but a man who had everything to lose, and now everything to protect. The monarchy may have mistaken his silence for submission, but Mike Tindall had just crossed a threshold. And from that night forward, every whispered strategy, every veiled threat, every loaded word would be captured, sealed in a digital vault that would one day ignite a storm. But Camilla's streamlining wasn't just a passing remark, it was part of a meticulous, long-buried plan that may now be crumbling. For years, whispers suggested Camilla was more than just a queen consort, she was the strategist in the shadows. The leaked audio appears to confirm the worst. A covert operation to consolidate royal power and eliminate dissent from within. The recording wasn't chaotic. It was cold, calm, and terrifyingly clear. Camilla's voice, measured, methodical, outlined a vision for a future monarchy stripped of its complications, purified of what she deemed unnecessary legacy. "We need to trim the excess," she said. Not in jest, not in passing, but with the deliberation of someone who had thought long and hard about what that meant. And then, she began naming names. Princess Anne, resistant to modern optics. The York sisters, redundant in a digital age. Even Zara, the woman once beloved by the public for her humility and independence, was branded an emotional distraction. This wasn't a queen speaking casually, it was a general drawing lines on a battlefield. More disturbing than the names were the intentions behind them. Camilla described an inner circle, a core four, that she believed should be the future face of the monarchy. Herself, Charles, William, and Catherine. Notably absent were the voices of tradition, balance, and challenge. It was a curation of loyalty and image, designed to minimize resistance and maximize control. Camilla didn't want a family, she wanted a brand, one she could direct, one that followed her script. And as the audio continued, it became clear this wasn't some newly formed idea. It had been building for years, nurtured in silence, masked behind formal smiles. She reportedly referred to other royals as outdated ornaments, symbols of a time the firm needed to outgrow. The language wasn't just dismissive, it was surgical. Each phrase a cut, each suggestion a quiet exile. But beneath the arrogance was a strategy, carefully cloaked in the language of modernity. She spoke of public fatigue, of streamlined visibility, and reduced overhead. All terms that sounded sensible until you realized they were weapons. The monarchy wasn't being reformed. It was being rewritten, and only those who served her vision had a place in it. Perhaps most chilling was the moment she spoke of Harry and Meghan, not with sorrow, but with satisfaction. They were allowed to go, she said. Not forced, not rejected. Allowed. Like pawns released from the board once they'd played their part. There was no regret in her voice, only control. It reframed everything. The fractures, the exits, the media wars, it all now seemed less like unfortunate consequence, and more like coordinated cleansing. As the audio spread, every word was dissected, every silence analyzed. And while some still questioned its authenticity, those closest to the crown knew this wasn't fabrication. This was confirmation. The carefully cultivated image of a supportive consort was unraveling. What remained was a woman wielding influence from behind closed doors, with a plan to reshape the crown in her likeness. But if Camilla was plotting her internal royal reformation, what drove Mike to betray her with such damning evidence? He married into the firm with no royal blood, only heart and loyalty. So why would Mike Tindall, once fiercely protective of the monarchy, choose to risk it all? Was it for Zara, their children, or a final stand against a woman he saw as dismantling everything sacred? From the moment Mike Tindall entered the royal sphere, he knew he wasn't cut from the same cloth. A national rugby hero, a man shaped by grit and team loyalty, he carried none of the airs expected of royalty, yet his sincerity made him a quiet favorite among the public. He wasn't born into blue blood, but he married into a lineage weighed down by centuries of secrets, sacrifices, and silent wars. Through it all, he remained steadfast, loyal, respectful, especially to the Queen, who in her later years was said to have held a particular fondness for the man who never pretended to be anything but himself. And through Princess Anne, Mike found a second mother, unyielding in her expectations, but unwavering in her trust. Yet beneath this exterior of camaraderie, a quiet battle was unfolding behind palace gates, and Camilla's rise brought with it a chill that even Mike couldn't ignore. The tension didn't explode overnight. It was a slow freeze. Whispers began during the Platinum Jubilee, when Camilla reportedly pushed for tighter control over appearances and public-facing roles. Mike, though never an official working royal, had been a reliable presence at family events, engagements, and fundraisers. But suddenly, he and Zara were being shifted further from the spotlight. Invitations stopped. Access changed. What was once a warm, albeit unofficial, position began to feel more like exile. Behind closed doors, the sense of marginalization grew unbearable. Conversations with Zara, once light and hopeful, turned somber. He saw her spirit dim. And with every passing week, it became clearer. This wasn't oversight. It was intentional. Mike's instincts honed on the rugby field told him when something was off. Camilla's words, her glances, her sudden influence over the king's agenda, they were signals of a deeper transformation. Not of modernizing the monarchy, but of manipulating it. And so Mike listened. Observed. Quietly absorbed the shift in power, the realignment of alliances, and the erasure of roles that had once brought unity. He watched as the pillars of tradition were chipped away under the guise of progress. And then came the tipping point. A private remark made by Camilla during an off-the-record conversation about cleaning house. He didn't react outwardly, but inside, he broke. The idea to record wasn't born from rage, it came from heartbreak. From the realization that no one else would hold her accountable. That the crown, for all its splendor, had no true mechanism for protecting its soul from rot within. Mike didn't do it for himself. He didn't do it for fame. He did it for Zara, for Anne, for the Queen's legacy, and for the belief that the monarchy could still be something honorable. The leak in many ways was his final cry, not to destroy, but to preserve what little was left untouched. A last-ditch plea to stop a woman who, in his eyes, was rewriting history with a pen dipped in ambition and sealed with silence. But as the dust settles, the question isn't just what Camilla said, it's what she meant to do with that power. Beneath the polite titles and royal wave lies a blueprint of erasure. The leaked audio reveals a phrase repeated multiple times by Camilla: Operation White Glove. What does it mean? Insiders now believe it was her code for a silent, strategic elimination of opposition. The phrase itself sounded harmless, even genteel. White glove. But as investigators and insiders pieced together the fragments of Camilla's conversations, a darker meaning began to emerge, one laced with precision, concealment, and calculated removal. Far from a simple metaphor, white glove was understood to represent a methodical plan of royal realignment, executed not with loud declarations, but with silent strokes of erasure. It was the art of disappearance without scandal, removing those who no longer served the crown's image while preserving the illusion of unity. A PR perfect purge, dressed in silk and spun with headlines. No confrontation. Just quiet vanishing acts. staged to appear as voluntary retreats or natural retirements. It started subtly. Funding streams for lesser royals were quietly rerouted. Public engagements disappeared from calendars. Patronages went unanswered, all under the guise of modernizing. But those who paid close attention knew this was no spontaneous reform. It was deliberate, targeted, and relentless. The York sisters, once darlings of charity events and royal tours, suddenly found themselves iced out of the inner circle. Princess Anne, long admired for her tireless commitment, began receiving fewer invitations to high-profile engagements. Even Edward and Sophie, typically apolitical within the firm, were reportedly blindsided by abrupt administrative reshuffles. The message was clear. If you weren't part of the core, you were being phased out. What fueled this operation wasn't just Camilla's vision of a streamlined monarchy. It was power, quiet, unchallenged control over the throne's public face. Insiders claimed she was positioning herself to influence King Charles's future appointments, placing her own trusted allies in key palace roles, from press secretaries to private advisors. She didn't need to be seen as a tyrant. She only needed to be the voice closest to the king's ear. And it worked. Decisions previously guided by committee were now funneled through her circle. The royal household had begun to resemble a corporation, one where branding mattered more than blood. Adding another layer of intrigue were growing suspicions of media manipulation. Whispers emerged that Camilla's allies were feeding the press-selected stories, subtly undermining non-core royals through anonymous concerns or fabricated scandals. Negative coverage of Zara, Beatrice, and even Anne began to surface more frequently, always sourced vaguely, always perfectly timed. It was a media machine operating in the shadows, offering plausible deniability while shaping public perception with surgical precision. And within the family, the fractures deepened. Zara reportedly became wary of every interaction. Conversations grew strained. Trust eroded. Even casual encounters were clouded by fear of surveillance or strategic twisting. What once felt like family now felt like a chessboard, and Camilla was moving the pieces with unnerving clarity. But the most ominous moment came when she reportedly said, "It's time to finish what we started." No context. No explanation. Just a phrase that hung in the air like a final warning. To those who had heard it, it was not merely an endgame, it was a declaration that she had been orchestrating this all along. But Camilla underestimated the one wildcard in the royal family she couldn't control: the public. Within 24 hours, the palace gates became a battlefield of words. Protesters, headlines, and even former staff turned on Camilla. The people who once tolerated her ascent now demanded accountability, fueled by one man's recording and a nation's betrayal. The first ripple came online small, sudden, sharp. Then the storm erupted. What had begun as whispers of discontent surged into a nationwide outcry. Petitions flooded the internet, demanding investigations, transparency, and in some cases, Camilla's outright removal from royal life. The monarchy, already standing on fragile public goodwill, now found itself caught in the crossfire of a betrayal too loud to bury. Footage began circulating. Furious citizens lined the gates of Buckingham Palace, holding signs, chanting, demanding truth. They didn't just want answers, they wanted justice. Camilla, once reluctantly accepted, was now openly rejected. And then came the devastating blow from within the very walls Camilla thought protected her. Former palace staff, some long retired, others recently dismissed, began speaking anonymously. Their accounts, matching the tone and language of the leaked audio, confirmed what many feared: the recording was real. And it wasn't a one-time slip. It was the tip of an iceberg built from years of hidden strategy and cold calculations. Former aides described Camilla as increasingly obsessed with optics, control, and influence over Charles's decisions. Suddenly, the audio wasn't just scandalous, it was believable. The silence from the palace press office, instead of diffusing the situation, only deepened suspicion. The absence of denial became its own kind of confession. Inside Parliament, the impact was undeniable. While no politician dared to criticize the monarchy outright, several quietly distanced themselves. Public events were postponed. Private meetings were canceled. Royal engagements meant to symbolize unity were suddenly awkward, forced, or completely abandoned. The political class could smell instability, and none wanted to be tied to a ship caught in scandal. Behind the scenes, advisors urged caution. Wait it out. Do not respond. But each hour of silence fed the fury. It was no longer about the recording. It was about what it represented: entitlement, manipulation, and a betrayal of public trust. Amid the chaos, a photo emerged that broke the hearts of many. Mike and Zara, visibly distraught, were seen leaving their home in tears. For all the noise around them, this image silenced everything. These were not schemers. These were parents, royals by blood and marriage, now hunted by the very institution they tried to protect. The same public that once cheered Camilla's resilience now turned their sympathy toward the man who leaked her secrets and the woman who stood by him. This wasn't just scandal anymore. It was tragedy. But as the outside world burned with scandal, the inside of the palace grew colder and far more dangerous. Within palace walls, trust evaporated. Rooms were swept for bugs. Phones were checked. Allies turned suspicious. Camilla wasn't just under scrutiny, she was on a mission to find the traitor. But would she strike back? Or was the queen consort already too exposed? The moment the audio reached the public, the palace shifted into crisis mode. Security protocols were tightened. Communications were sealed. And within those historic walls, the mood darkened. Where once there were whispers of protocol, now there were accusations behind closed doors. Camilla's calm veneer cracked as paranoia surged. Every glance, every paused conversation, every unexplained absence became a potential sign of betrayal. She ordered her inner circle to trace the origin of the leak. Confidential lines were shut down. Staff phones were confiscated. Long-trusted aides were questioned. This wasn't damage control, it was a hunt. Inside sources revealed that Camilla confronted King Charles behind the scenes, not with apology, but defiance. She didn't ask for protection, she demanded it. She accused those closest to the family of orchestrating a smear campaign, warning Charles that unless he took her side, she would be forced to defend herself publicly. The king, torn between loyalty and survival, reportedly begged for calm. But Camilla wanted names. She wanted punishment. What she received instead was silence, and a wife's silence in times of royal scandal often screams louder than any speech. Meanwhile, Zara made her stance unmistakably clear. She quietly declined to appear at a royal engagement she had once been honored to attend. No official reason, no statement, just absence. But in a world ruled by optics, it was as loud as a declaration. The bond between cousins frayed further. William, the future king, remained composed on camera. But behind the scenes, whispers described him as privately furious. Not just at the leak, but at what the recording revealed. Not only had Camilla exposed a vision of power that excluded some of the most loyal family members, but she had also done so with chilling clarity. Camilla, feeling her grip slipping, escalated her efforts. She demanded an internal probe, one that would root out any other devices, any other possible recordings. The palace began operating under siege. Staff began speaking less, fearing they could be implicated in something they didn't understand. Some even requested to be transferred away from Clarence House and Buckingham altogether. The air was thick with tension, suspicion, and unspoken truths. But the most defining fracture came from Anne. The Princess Royal, respected and reserved, allegedly confronted Camilla in private. No cameras, no staff, just two women, bound by title but divided by principle. The conversation was brief but brutal. Anne, known for never mincing words, reportedly told Camilla, "You don't crown yourself by tearing down your family." And just when it seemed like the crown's foundations couldn't fracture further, another leak emerged. As the palace scrambles to contain the fallout, a second audio file drops, more explosive, more targeted. This time, Camilla doesn't speak in code. She names the royals she wants gone, the ones she wants elevated, and the chilling method she intends to use. The first leak had sent tremors through the monarchy, but the second was nothing short of an earthquake. Uploaded anonymously to an encrypted forum and quickly picked up by global media, the new recording stripped away the careful language of strategy and exposed raw ambition. Camilla's voice, unmistakable and sharper than before, laid out a blueprint for domination. No more metaphors, no more veiled threats, just names and intent. She listed Anne, Beatrice, and Edward as deadweight, suggesting they were relics of a past that no longer served the crown's image. Their roles, she claimed, created clutter in the public eye. Their value? Minimal. Their presence? A distraction. But it wasn't just insults, it was execution. Camilla spoke of pulling funding, severing titles from responsibilities, and stripping patronages quietly under the guise of structural reform. It would be billed as modernization, but in truth, it was removal. No more shadows over the throne, she said coldly, her words slicing through centuries of tradition like a dagger. The phrase hit headlines within minutes. Commentators gasped. Royal analysts went into overdrive. If the first audio cast doubt on her intentions, the second confirmed them in no uncertain terms. This wasn't modernization. It was a monarchy in the making, crafted in her own image. The most devastating line, however, was one uttered softly and almost as an afterthought. "Charles has a soft heart," Camilla said, "but he doesn't need to know everything." That single sentence flipped the entire narrative. It suggested not just ambition but manipulation. That behind the king's back, the queen consort was orchestrating a silent coup. That she wasn't just shaping the future, she was doing so without his knowledge or consent. The idea that the monarch himself might be unaware of the moves being made in his name shattered any illusion of unity. The press didn't hold back. Global coverage exploded. Pundits began openly questioning the structure of the royal household. Was Camilla acting alone, or did she have allies? Was the king complicit or powerless? Public opinion, already fragile, shifted into open distrust. Even those who had once defended Camilla's ascent now found themselves cornered by undeniable evidence of intent. This wasn't gossip. This was confession, deliberate, recorded, and damning. Within palace walls, the mood turned apocalyptic. Panic replaced protocol. Silence replaced ceremony. And yet for Camilla, the moment of reckoning had only just begun. The second leak, far from silencing her critics, became the rallying cry of those demanding her downfall. The monarchy, already reeling from scandal, now stood on the brink of collapse not because of external enemies, but because of a voice from within. But for Mike and Zara, the fallout wasn't just reputational, it was deeply personal. They exposed the truth and paid the ultimate price. Mike and Zara, once the darlings of a modern monarchy, now find themselves cold-shouldered by the very institution they tried to save. Was it worth it? In the days following the second leak, the palace doors that had once opened effortlessly for Mike Tindall were abruptly shut. Invitations ceased. Events he'd long been expected to attend were now under review. There were no formal statements, only silence. The cruelest kind. The message was clear. Loyalty to the crown had conditions, and Mike had broken them. As headlines spiraled and public opinion surged in their favor, the palace turned inward, tightening its grip on the narrative, while quietly casting out one of its own. Mike, the man who had stood for family and truth, now stood alone. For Zara, the betrayal cut even deeper. Her roles, often outside the main spotlight but deeply meaningful, began to vanish without explanation. Charities she'd long championed reported unreturned calls, postponed visits, unexplained scheduling delays. What had once been respect became distance, and what had been partnership became silence. To the public, it seemed absurd punishing a woman for her husband's courage. But within the palace, perception was everything. And Zara, once a golden thread in the royal fabric, was now seen as a liability. The emotional toll became impossible to ignore. Friends close to the couple hinted at quiet suffering, long nights, and mounting pressure. What had begun as a stand for truth was now a daily fight for dignity. But outside the walls of the palace, the tide was turning. The public, already disillusioned with the monarchy's shifting priorities, found their champions in Mike and Zara. Social media ignited with support. The hashtag Justice for Zara trended for days. Protest signs began bearing their names. They were no longer just royals, they had become symbols of resistance. Their exile wasn't a disgrace. It was proof that they had dared to speak when others stayed silent. In their pain, the public saw integrity, and in their silence, they saw strength. Camilla notably said nothing. No statements, no interviews, no denials. Her grip on the monarchy, once unquestioned, now shimmered with instability. She remained in place, But her power no longer felt invincible. Every engagement she attended was viewed through a new lens. Every smile, every gesture scrutinized. The woman who had once rebranded herself as the survivor now looked like the orchestrator. And still, she refused to flinch. Perhaps she believed the storm would pass. Perhaps she underestimated how far-reaching the consequences of her own voice would be. And yet, in the shadows of that silence, one gesture hinted at a crack in the royal wall. Whispers emerged that William, stoic, watchful, always calculated, had privately reached out to Mike. Not as a prince, not as a future king, but as a man who understood betrayal, loss, and the weight of choosing truth over silence. Whether that message was reconciliation or warning, no one could say. But it marked a shift, subtle, silent, but unmistakable. And now, with the monarchy's image hanging by a thread, all eyes turn to King Charles. He sits at the heart of a royal storm with the woman he loves on one side and the institution he's sworn to protect on the other. As King Charles faces his most defining moment, the question is no longer who he trusts, but what kind of king he dares to become. For decades, Charles waited for the crown through scandal, tragedy, and shifting tides of public sentiment. And when he finally stepped into the role, he did so with the promise of modern leadership and steady tradition. But now, just years into his reign, the throne trembles beneath his feet, not from external forces, but from the collapse erupting within. The woman he defended tirelessly, whose presence once divided the nation but eventually earned a fragile truce, now stands accused not in court, but in the court of public opinion. The voice that once whispered reassurance in his ear has become the source of a thunderous uproar. And Charles, for all his training and composure, finds himself facing a choice no monarch should ever have to make. Behind palace walls, conversations once held in whispers are now echoed in urgent meetings. Advisors weigh the future. Some argue for containment, others for transparency, and a few, the boldest of the old guard, quietly speak of abdication not as punishment but as preservation. If trust continues to erode, if public outrage festers beyond repair, would stepping down be the final act of loyalty to the crown? It's a question Charles never imagined entertaining, and yet now it lingers with brutal weight. Because the monarchy doesn't just need survival, it needs credibility. And in this moment, he is the only one who can deliver it. Sources inside the palace suggest discussions have begun around Camilla's public role. Not removal, not disgrace, but quiet repositioning, diminished visibility, reduced appearances, a slow fade into the background to protect the institution from the shadow her voice has cast. It wouldn't be a divorce of love, but of image, of necessity. It would be a devastating blow for a man who spent his life fighting for her acceptance. But the crown, above all, demands sacrifice, even of the heart. As Charles grapples with his crossroads, William's influence continues to rise. He has remained mostly silent throughout the chaos, but silence is not absence. Those close to him say his voice carries more weight than ever behind closed doors. That his vision for the monarchy is being shaped in real time, waiting to be enacted. And if Charles falters, it is William who may be called upon not just to guide, but to lead. The idea of a regency once taboo is now being whispered like prophecy. In the end, this is more than scandal, more than a headline. This is the crown confronting its own reflection. A monarchy forced to decide whether it will cling to loyalty or evolve through pain. Whether Charles will rise to restore what has been shaken or protect what may no longer be savable. The decision will define more than his reign. It will define the legacy of a royal line already marked by turmoil. One recording, one betrayal, one unraveling dynasty. The truth is out, and nothing will ever be the same again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.